Now that we've accomplished our grading for our site, our road, our pond, now we can start adding in some more detailed site improvements to determine our materials that are going to be required to construct this site. So before we actually add the site improvement materials, we have to do a little cleanup, because our initial workflow, we really just put stuff on some generic layers. We didn't define heavy duty asphalt from light duty asphalt, our sidewalks, and some other information. So what we want to do is we want to kind of clean up and add some more detail. So we'll start with that first, and then we'll go into the improvements. So the first thing I'll show you, if I go to takeoff and I go to identify site regions and I go to design, I select the design category, you can see that we've got some highlighted orange areas, which are our potential boundaries. The magenta area here is a potential boundary, but you can see it's not closing in this area here, so it's showing up as magenta because it's not a closed object. You can see our outer limits of our site also include the road. We're only going to be interested in this case of the parking in the building area, because we're going to do the road a little bit differently. So we need to define some boundaries in this area here as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just use this as a kind of a visual to see, okay, I need to add some more boundaries. I need to add in my heavy and light duty pavement areas and some other data. So we're going to start in the back, and we're going to start back here, and we're going to take these lines, which represent really pavement marking, but what it is, it's actually going to be a difference between heavy duty asphalt and heavy duty concrete. Okay, so we're going to put concrete in this area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those two lines, and I'm just going to simply relayer them. So I'm going to put those using the properties. I'm going to put them on my design layers so that they are part of the concrete. So I've got this design concrete layer. Okay, so I'll put those there. Then the front, let me close this. The front of the building, I've got this area here for a canopy and this area here for a canopy. Those are actually going to be our sidewalks, so we're going to put those on a sidewalk layer. All right, so you can see it's the building overhang. Right below it is actually the concrete as well. So we're going to put those on the sidewalk layer. So if we had drawn this from the schematic or relayered it initially, we really wouldn't have to do this step. But working through this entire project from the schematic, we're laying this information out. Now we could also, put in, like, if we want to determine the paint area or the paint stripings, we could put this on a layer. We're not concerned with that. We're just concerned with our earthwork as well as our utilities and our curb and gutter. All right, so we've got those. We then also want to put all this curb on a certain layer. So if I hover over it, I can see that it's actually on the right layer, but it's not in the right category. It's not showing up, because if you go to identify site boundaries and I click on design, you can see that it's not depicting that as a boundary. So what I want to do is I want to go to categorize, and I want to go to design, and I want to make sure that I have a green check mark next to that layer. So my design curb flow line doesn't have a green check mark. I'm going to click on this checkbox, and I'm going to put down here, I'm going to say contains potential site boundaries, or boundary lines. So I'm going to click on that. That puts the green check mark there. So now when I actually go back to that, pick on design, now you can see that that shows up as a boundary. So what I can do here is I can draw in some line work for this area in here. Okay, so I'm going to go and just use a regular line, and we're just going to call this heavy paving, and we'll go ahead and we'll set that on a layer for the pavement. So we'll just come up and put it under heavy asphalt. And I'm just going to go from here. Don't worry about the elevation, and I'm going to go over to let's say perpendicular to this line over here. So we'll go over to that point there. All right. Now, when I do that, oops, actually let me edit that line because I never saved it. So let's go right click and perpendicular again. So we'll pick perpendicular. Save that elevation. So now if I go, just to show you real quick, because we got more to do, but if I go to takeoff, identify site regions, pick design, now you'll see we have an orange boundary within our parking and paving area. Okay, so we're going to do a couple more. I'm going to come in and I can leave this there. I'm going to go to CAD, I'm going to go to line string, and I'm going to do heavy pavement again, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to pick this point here, and I'm just going to go all the way down to this point here, and then I'm going to come over to, let's say, we'll just go to this point here. So I'll just go nearest or midpoint of that. Okay. We then want to put another line, so I'm going to go new again, and we want to go from this point here. We're going to go to let's just go to here. This is just parking striping, so we're just going to pave through this. So I'll save that point, and then we'll also just come over here. So we'll do heavy paving there as well, and then I'll just come down, and what we will do is we will connect in here. Alright, so if I come down and just click on this point here, I can then wrap this around. So I'm going to use my append line command. I'm going to pick this. I'm going to start at that point, and I'm going to come over to the end of that. So you can see it's drawn that line in. Okay, so now when I close this, I can continue adding another segment. Okay, so let's get out of edit mode and go back to append or draw line. And we're going to come over, and I'm just going to pick this point over here. We'll save that, and I'm going to append this line as well, starting from here, going to there, and then we're going to add another line string. We'll switch this to straight, and I'm just going to bring this up. We'll go to this point here, and then we'll close it in on back over here. Okay. So around the outer building is going to be my heavy duty pavement. Within the building, or within the parking area, is going to be my light duty pavement. All right, now we want to add one more, and we'll just come down. I'll pick this spot here, so let's change that to that one. And because we want to make this light duty pavement as well. Okay. So now we've defined our parking. We want to also, let's close, you can see now our parking area has been enclosed. Okay. Now we've got to add a couple other boundaries for our seated area. So we're going to put seed here. We're going to put sod inside of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another line string. I'm going to put it on, we'll call it seated area. And we'll put it on a new layer. So I'm going to create a new layer by hitting the space bar. We're going to put in design dash seated area, and we'll just set that to a green color. We'll protect it, and we'll put it on our design group as well. So I'm just going to come in and just add a couple of lines here. So I'm just going to draw a line string from this point here, which is our boundary, and I'm just going to go up to, we'll just pick this point here, and then I'll come over to the back of curb over here. Okay. Then I'll create a new one, and we got to close off this area here. So I'm going to go from here to the top back of the wall. I'm going to use our nice append command to pick the top back of the wall. Pick that as my starting point. We'll wrap around the wall. We'll come over to here. We'll close that and continue drawing. Switches back to a straight segment, and we'll just close this right up in here. Okay. So that's going to be the seated area, and now we're going to come down. We're going to do one more new one, where I'm going to come from the top back of curb here, and we're going to go to this, which is our shoulder. So I'm just going to right click and go perpendicular. to here. So again, I'm just drawing in some boundaries here, and we're going to do the append line command again. Use this as a guide. I'm going to pick here, and I'm going to take that all the way down, and we're just going to go to here. Alright, so I'm going to pick a point right there, and now I'm just going to go and add in this next line segment, and we're going to go to there. Okay. So if I close this, now I can see that I've got some closed boundaries. However, the green line in the seated area didn't create a boundary because we created that new layer on the fly. We have to actually add it to the category. So we'll do that next. Let me go now to takeoff, and you're going to go to categorize. So what we need to do is we need to go to unknown in the categories, unknown category. And I'm going to take this seated area that we have here, and I'm going to move it and reassign it to my design category. Then I'm going to go to the design category, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to pick that seated area, and I'm going to make sure that it contains a potential boundary. So now when I do that, and we go back to our improvements, now you can see I've got a boundary in here. Now we need to do one more thing, and that is to, let me close this. We're going to take the pond and we're going to put that on our layer because we're going to do something different in the pond. So I'm going to go to properties, and instead of the breakline layer, I'm going to go to create a new layer, and we're going to call this DES-pond. Now again, this pond and the seated, if we had put those in our drawing template and we had had this originally in the template when we started the project, we wouldn't have to be doing these extra steps. Really not a big deal, but again, as you build out this, it'll grow over time, and you'll have all this stuff already done. So some of these little minor edits and steps that I'm doing, you may not have to do, and it depends on how you draw your data or get your data originally. All right, so I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go to categories again. I got to categorize that new layer I created. So under unknown, I'm going to go to design pond. We're going to put that on the design layer. I'm going to go to design, and we're going to contain potential boundaries. So now we go back to identify our site regions, and we pick on design. You'll see now the pond and everything has areas. All right, so we're just verifying our areas are closed and are represented appropriately. Now there's one other step, or a couple other steps we want to do. When we drew these lines in, we drew them in 3D. If we leave them in 3D and they're part of the design category, they're actually going to get used as breaklines in our surface, and we don't want that to happen. So what I need to do is I need to come in here and select these lines that we drew. So I'm just going to pick them, because even though I want them as part of the design category, I don't want them to be breaklines and interfere with the grading of my finished ground surface. Okay. So the pond we're going to leave because the pond is part of that surface. Okay, these guys up here though, we don't want those to interfere with our surface either. So again, the seated areas we're going to change, and the heavy duty pavement. So just the line work that we drew to close out the boundaries, I'm selecting. I'm going to go to data prep, elevation, and I'm going to undefine the elevation. This way they won't get used when it rebuilds the surface. So now that I set them down basically to 0, and if I go to surfaces and rebuild my surface, which is going to happen when you run your reports, it's going to automatically rebuild the surface. So I'm going to rebuild this, and we're going to take a look, and I can see I don't have any flags. There is a flag down here I'm going to click on, and you can see that only refers to our original ground. So there's I think a contour that crosses somewhere, but it's outside our working area, so I'm not concerned with it. But if I saw any yellow flags in here, then I would know that I got crossing break lines in my finished design is not accurate. I need to adjust it. Okay. So that's how you mess around or close out the boundary areas that you need to have. The other piece that I want to show you is I want to focus on my utilities. Now my utilities are mostly set up and drawn on the proper layer. However, this particular run is actually going to be made up of different pipe sizes. So what I want to do, instead of having one continuous line segment, is I'm actually going to break it. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to, let's say we break it here because that first segment is going to be 15. And then it's going to go to an 18-inch pipe until it gets to, let's say, here. Okay, so I'm going to break it at that point. And then it's going to go to a 24-inch pipe. So if I pick this first segment, that's going to be 24-inch pipe. So I'm just going to right click and go to properties. And I'm going to set that on the 24-inch RCP layer. Okay. So then I'm going to go and I'm going to pick this pipe. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to properties. And I'm going to set that to the 18-inch RCP pipe. So now I have all my site improvements, or all my site improvement areas identified. I've got all my utilities on the proper layer. I got my curb and gutter on the proper layer. I got my building on the proper layer. Everything is layered appropriately the way it should be. In the next video, I'll show you how to add the site improvements, and then we will look at the reports.